Hi everyone, how's it going? And I know I haven't made a video in a quick minute, and naturally, guess what this video is going to be about? No, it's not going to be about body thetans. It's not going to be about how we're not allowed to masturbate. It's going to be about Linkin Park. Who would have guessed? So, I'm going to give my perspective on it because I think I have a Xenu slash God given right to. Of course, I don't believe in Xenu. I didn't even hear of Xenu until the South Park episode when I was like 15 years old. But, inside joke. I am a child, or I should say a teenager of the 90s, though. And Linkin Park formed when I was about 16 years old. So I was a child in the 80s, but as a teenager, I grew up in the peak of the grunge music era, meaning Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Rage Against the Machine. Last but not least, you could say Red Hot Chili Peppers. There's so many more, legendary bands of the 90s. Linkin Park did not really fit in the grunge category. Linkin Park was sort of like one of the purveyors of, I would say, I don't know if I would call it like specifically emo music, but they were still rock. They just weren't grunge. They sort of started the whole, I don't know, Blink 182, Linkin Park, that whole style of music. Which, by the way, it's interesting. I'm a huge Blink 182 fan, and the lead singer of Blink 182 sings in a more emotional way than Chester Bennington does, in my personal opinion. So, this video is going to be a little bit different than most people. I'm not here to be like, oh my god, Emily is evil and this and that, although I do think she is an absolutely horrible fucking choice. And it has really, the Danny Masterson aspect of it is like such a tiny reason why I think she is a horrible choice. That's like 15% of it. My main reason why I think she's a horrible choice is because Chester Bennington obviously suffered from a lot of depression and mental health issues, and we all know how he untimely ended his life. Right? We can all agree on that. Chester Bennington ended his life. Unfortunately. Sadly. So did Chris Cornell. It was a devastating blow to people like myself who grew up in the 90s music era. And when you think about it, all of the 90s musicians, I would say 90% of them have committed the S word. Kurt Cobain, Lane Staley, that was in drug overdose. Then you have Peter Steele of Typo Negative. He wasn't necessarily grunge, but he was a 90s staple for those that were into the industrial goth music era. Chris Cornell, which is probably one of the best vocalists, I would say one of the top 5 vocalists in history, in rock and roll history. We know what happened to him. Chester Bennington. There are numerous others. If you grew up in the 90s, you remember that electronic music band, Prodigy. That was more electronic. He did the same thing. Now, if you want to get into the underground Detroit house music legends, one of my favorites was Disco D, which not too many people have heard of. He, unfortunately, ended his own life as well. The list goes on and on and on and on and on of 90s musicians, regardless of what musical genre it is. For some reason, there is a heavily I don't know how to describe it. Just a heavy connection of the S word with 90s musicians. Now, according to Scientology, this is because psychiatry invented the whole 90s music genre. And I was told this firsthand by Sea Org members. And you have heard numerous people like Aaron, Jenna, all of the top anti-Scientology YouTubers, they discuss this, how as Sea Org members, a major part of what they have to do is go to like the smaller public orgs within the US and go. Well, I was someone that was at those smaller public orgs being raised in Scientology, and I witnessed people like Nora and Aaron, although I don't know if I met them specifically as a teenager. It's too hard to tell because none of the Sea Org members would talk to me because I tried LSD at 15 years old. So yeah, I just wasn't talked to. But it is true. Sea Org members go to public orgs to kind of pump us up and like, yeah, we got to save the planet and we have to do this and we have to do that and blah, blah, blah. Well, I remember going to the Phoenix Org's donation event for the Ideal Org, and this began in like 1997. And it took 20 years of the Phoenix Org, or the Church of Scientology collectively, receiving donations. 20 years later, Phoenix finally got an Ideal Org. As we all joke, we call it an Ideal Morgue because that place has the same 30 fucking Scientologists in that building since the Ronald Reagan era when I was 5 years old. It's literally the same fucking 5 people. I'm going to be generous and say 15 because I'm always generous with my numbers in case if I under or overestimate it. So, as far as like the whole Linkin Park situation, what I would say is like, of course, it is obviously disgraceful that Emily Armstrong defended Danny Armstrong and was a witness, was a character witness of what a great human being he is. It's obviously, why didn't she apologize 6 months ago? Why didn't she apologize when he was incarcerated, right? That would have been the time for her to give a public statement when he received his prison sentence. That would have been the time for her to say, I'm sorry, just like, what's that dude's name? I don't know. Demi Moore's ex-husband. My brain's not working right now. But a lot of people that were character witnesses for Danny Masterson, they, as soon as he was sentenced to 30 years to life, which most likely it sounds like it's going to be a life sentence, they all retracted instantly, like, wow, we're sorry, we did not understand this. Which is really fucking stupid when you think about it, because no shit, the dude's gonna be in prison for the rest of his fucking life, and you have a profession where you're going to be in the public eye as a actor or a musician. So no shit, Sherlock, you have to apologize. So people apologizing for Danny Masterson months after he was incarcerated, that is not an act of altruistic, it's just not altruistic. They're doing it because their management is telling them to fucking do it, or it's going to damage their career and they're not going to make any money. And if the actor or musicians make no money, well, guess who else doesn't make any money? The whole Hollywood entertainment industry takes a deduction from that. So Emily Armstrong barely giving an announcement 2 days ago about Danny Masterson. First of all, that's fake as fuck. It is the most unaltruistic thing I have ever fucking witnessed. But it is typical of a Scientologist, because Scientologists are naturally very self-centered, selfish, narcissistic, and they only give a shit about their own selves and their potential to make money. It's quite apparent to me that Emily Armstrong is looking at being the lead singer of Linkin Park as like, wow, I just hit the jackpot, Mom. I'm going to be worldwide famous. I'm going to be joining one of the most famous rock bands in like 90s grunge / rock and roll history. That's probably what she told her mom. And then her mom, her some mother, probably patted her on the head and was like, good job. Oh, do you know how this can impact the world globally and influence people to become Scientologists? I'm so proud of you, my little girl. My little Mahita. Well, I shouldn't say Mahita because I think Emily Armstrong is not a Latina, but you guys get what I'm saying. So that's how it goes. This is a prideful moment for the Church of Scientology to have a person to be the lead singer of one of the most prolific 1990s bands in history, right? Now I've posted about this extensively on my Facebook, which is where I am most active on Facebook. I really don't do YouTube as like a big thing. You know, I do it once in a while. At this point, I'm not really looking at YouTube as like a major focal point, because I'm one of those people where like things have to build up and I really have to feel like that it's extremely important to talk about before I will do it. And that doesn't happen too often. It happens maybe once every 3 weeks. Plus, you all have a plethora of other people that grew up in Scientology that are much better at speaking about it than I am. You guys have Nora, you have Liz Gale, you have Aaron, you have, you know, everyone else. I understand I'm just like a needle in a haystack, and that's fine with me. You know, that's totally fucking fine with me. I think that my perspective about this is a little bit different because I was born and raised in Scientology, but as people say, oh, but you went to public schools, so you really don't know. So I want to tell you guys something, and it has to do with this Linkin Park Emily situation. I did go to public schools, and I do have a very vast understanding of society at large, the non-Scientology world, because I grew up in it. Conversely, I also grew up in the Scientology secret society, and I've explained this before. When you are an only child and your mother and father are fanatical Scientologists, and your half-sister is leading the Church of Scientology and she's the executive director in your entire fucking state, when you're a kid like me and you're growing up in Scientology, you kind of get screwed, and it's not fun. I did not have a very fun, pleasurable time being raised in Scientology. In fact, even though I went to public schools, I could not admit that I was being raised in Scientology. If I publicly admitted that I was being raised in Scientology while I was going to public schools, I would be completely ostracized. I probably would have had my ass kicked. I was already known as a weirdo a little bit somewhat, and it would have magnified my weirdo-ness 50 times more. And if people knew I was a Scientologist while I was going to grade school and junior high and high school, the amount of backlash and ridicule and bullying and getting my ass kicked, I probably would not be alive today because I would have committed the S word myself if I admitted that I was being raised in Scientology in a public school system environment. So I had to lie about it, and I had to say that I was a Catholic. Okay, I could, that's what I had to do to survive. Now, as far as Linkin Park, what people are not understanding about this is, and I've seen this and I've witnessed this firsthand, Scientology does not accept They actually detest and despise people who have attempted or committed the S word. They are repulsed by them, okay? So the fact that Chester Bennington, did what he did to end his life in Scientology standards, that is considered, he would be considered subhuman garbage. And it's actually a technical term. They call it PTS type 3. So if you've ever committed or attempted the S word, if you have ever taken antipsychotic medications, and if you have ever been institutionalized in a mental health facility, and Scientology will find out, because if you try to become a Scientologist, you have to write up your overts and withholds, and you also have to do a shitload of security checks. And on almost every single security check, there are those questions. Have you ever attempted the S word? Have you ever been committed in a psychiatric facility? If you answer yes to those questions, whether it's through an overt and withhold write-up or through a security check, they're going to send that shit to OSA. OSA's going to review it. And you know what's going to happen? If you're the person like Chester Bennington that writes like, hey, I attempted the S word 20 years ago. You know what happens? They stop your session or your whatever course you're on. They put you on the cans, ask you a few questions, and then they exit your ass right out the fucking happy door and tell you to never fucking come back again because you are unaccepted. You are not allowed to be a Scientologist. Now, I have witnessed this personally numerous times with people I don't know, and I did witness it personally with someone I do know that married into my family because my sister was the ED. And when you're a public Scientologist, being the executive director, that's like the top position you can obtain as a public Scientologist. This person was born and raised in Scientology. His parents were the wealthiest donators in the entire state of Arizona. And it was either a SEC check question or an OW write-up where he confessed that he attempted the S word years prior. And I personally observed them walking his ass out the fucking front door. And everybody, like, on staff was like, oh my God, what happened to so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. And this was the common conversation. Verbatim. All of the Scientologists were like, well, one of two things happened to him. Either he's gay or he's a suicide case. Either way, he is a complete dirtbag loser, so who cares? Goodbye. That was their attitude. And I saw him once at like a family outing months later, and his own family wouldn't even talk to him. His own parents, everyone, all of the Scientologists just like stayed away from him. Like, ugh, oh my God, that disgusting human being that attempted the S word before. What a gross individual. It's pretty messed up, you guys. Very, very messed up. And I have witnessed this, like I said, personally. And not only have I witnessed it, this is in Scientology Doctrine by L. Ron Hubbard, PTS type 3, and it straight up says if you are labeled PTS type 3, which is psychotic, you are prohibited from receiving, auditing, going up the bridge, or participating in Scientology, period. So that's the part of this Chester Bennington, Linkin Park, Armstrong thing that I have the problem with. Is they're replacing Chester Bennington, who would be considered PTS type 3 in Scientology, and they're replacing him with a singer who believes in the PTS type 3 ideology. And she inherently believes that people that are suicidal are scumbags. And I do not care about her saying that she is bisexual or a lesbian and she's still a Scientologist, because that is like saying that you are an atheist Christian. Okay? So this Emily chick obviously has some sort of Stockholm syndrome, or she's just scrambled in her fucking brain. Do you guys remember Dave Chappelle and his comedy skit where he's like this blind black man who joins the KKK, and he's black and he can't see, but he's just like, white power, and he's black. That's the equivalency of Emily Armstrong, in my viewpoint. Okay? If you are a member of the LGBT community, or if you have ever attempted the S word and you proudly say you are a Scientologist, you are a comedy show. You are just like Dave Chappelle, the black man, the blind black man, joining the KKK. It is the same thing in my viewpoint. So she's full of shit. And I think people need to research Scientology's ideology on the S word and mental health. First of all, Scientologists don't believe in mental health. It doesn't exist. Depression does not exist. Bipolar doesn't exist. If you are, the S word or have attempted it, you're a dirtbag. Point blank. Now, because of Emily's family's wealth and stature that is somewhat in the Hollywood community, she probably doesn't experience this on the same level as regular Joe Blow Scientologists. And then I posted a screenshot earlier on my community page. Another thing that I think is interesting is being that I was raised in Scientology, but I was also raised in like a public environment with mainstream society. I'm very familiar with how mainstream people act. The wogs of the universe, which is like 99% of the planet. And I'm reading like the comments. I'll read, I kind of read the articles and I did like Rolling Stone. I'm not a huge fan of, but I went directly to the comments because I'm like, the comments are from the fans, and Linkin Park fans are ultimately the ones that have the final say in this. Those of us in the ex-Scientology community, we don't get to dictate this one. We don't. Okay? And another thing that some of us have a hard time understanding is that not everybody likes us. Scientology is a very disliked cult, but for many people, a lot of people dislike those of us that were raised in Scientology. And I don't see the world through rose-colored glasses, and this is something that I learned a very long time ago, because I have experienced the hatred from mainstream society as a person that was raised in Scientology. I have, in face-to-face and personal like interactions, wherever, at nightclubs, concerts, bars, if my friend brings up that I was raised in Scientology, I have had to deal with countless times of people just talking shit to me, putting me down, telling me what a piece of shit I am. I'm used to it. We are not a well-liked group of people. And there is this misconception that just because we were raised in Scientology, that everyone feels sorry for us and cares about what we're going through. And that's entirely false. Entirely false. There are, I would say maybe it's like 40% of people that do feel sorry for us and empathize with us, but there is 60% that don't give a shit. And they look at children that were born in Scientology as we are a part of the problem. Look at it this way. If you guys remember all of the anti-Islam sentiment that happened after 9/11 and kids that were raised in Islam, do you remember how there was no sympathy towards children raised in Islam and they were looked at as little offspring of the whole hate machine? Well, that is what a lot of people think about those of us that were raised in Scientology. We are looked at as disgusting offspring of the hate machine. Some of us haven't realized that yet, and you will eventually. And I realized it back in the 90s because I was raised in a public Scientology environment. We are not well liked, you guys. And we need to get over this egotistical idea that everybody loves us and everybody wants to hug us and squeeze us and feel sorry for us. No, they fucking don't. No, they fucking don't. And this Linkin Park episode, I think, is a reality check for many of us. Because I have faced it firsthand. I would say about 50% of Linkin Park fans are telling us to go get lost, mind our own business, we don't know what we're talking about, and leave them the F alone. And they don't give a shit if we were raised in Scientology. I have faced this myself. I have seen Ian get completely bashed by Linkin Park fans. I've seen, like, all of us. Okay, I'm getting bashed on Facebook, like I said, because that's where I primarily am. But I find it interesting because Linkin Park sort of represents the non-Scientology universe. And by us yelling at Linkin Park fans and demanding that they look at things the same way that we do, it's really pissing them off. It's not accomplishing anything. I have tried tooth and nail with the debates I've been through on my Facebook page, explaining to Linkin Park fans, look, this is the equivalent of if Queen replaced Freddie Mercury with a gay bashing homophobe as their lead singer. It is exactly the same thing because Linkin Park is replacing Chester with somebody that despises mental illness, does not believe in it, and thinks that what Chester did is the most despicable act and disgraceful, disgusting act upon humanity. And the way Chester ended his life was completely and utterly just trash. That's what Scientologists believe about the S word. So I try explaining it to these Linkin Park fans. I would say 20% of them are getting it and they're researching it and they understand. 20%. That's it. 30% don't give a fuck. And they don't care about Scientology one way or the other. They just want to hear Linkin Park play music again. And then the remaining percent want us to leave them the fuck alone and not get involved in their musical matters. That's just the facts, you guys. That's just what I have observed and what I have witnessed. I try to be as educational as possible. And of course, Danny Masterson is the sensational headline, but it's a lot deeper than that. It gets into Scientology's lack of beliefs of mental health, period, because Scientology does not believe in depression or mental health. And it also has to do with the PTS type 3 psychotic label for people that have attempted the S word and people who have succeeded in completing the S word. Scientology looks at those people as complete trash bags. And there is no respect for people who have committed the S word whatsoever within Scientology. And if Chester Bennington was alive today, and if he tried to join the Church of Scientology, he would not be allowed to. I'm sure we all have heard Russell Brand's famous interview, and we all know Russell Brand has done every drug and tried committing the S word and all kinds of stuff. And Russell Brand says that Tom Cruise didn't even try to get him to join Scientology because Russell Brand was too much of a derelict and a fuck up that Tom Cruise didn't even want him to join. So yeah, that is the general consensus and attitude within Scientology. They have zero respect and zero regard for the mentally ill. They think mentally ill people and depressed people are the scum of the universe. You can look this up online. Type in PTS type 3, type in Scientology's PTS labels. I think that's really all I have to say. And I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I think ultimately, like I said on my community page, Chester Bennington has a lot. He has 6 kids, possibly more. One of them spoke out. Ultimately, I think this is going to be dictated by Chester Bennington's offspring and their viewpoints, which obviously they're pretty smart kids, at least the one that spoke out so far. He is the main influencer on this. Those of us speaking out against Scientology, we need to kind of check ourselves and realize that, yes, we do have an influence and an impact on this, but we're not the main ones. And the louder we scream and the more that we, say things, it's actually kind of having the opposite effect from what I've noticed. And it's having an opposite effect so much that I posted a screenshot on my community page of a Linkin Park fan who honestly believes that Mike Shinoda picked Emily Armstrong to save her from Scientology, and that this is a master plan by Mike Shinoda. He's doing this deliberately to collapse Scientology and save mankind. That was from a Linkin Park fan, and you could go on my community page and see this. This is a never-end Scientologist, by the way. There are a portion of them that actually believe this. They think Mike Shinoda is like a savior conquering Scientology by choosing Emily Armstrong. And from somebody that was raised in Scientology, and I have seen every insane belief system in Scientology imaginary, to see a never-end Scientologist say something like that like Linkin Park is choosing a Scientologist to save the planet from Scientology, and that us former Scientologists, like, we just don't get it. We don't understand the big plan of Linkin Park's choices. They're doing this on purpose to battle Scientology. I mean, seeing that is just like, holy shit. It takes a lot to give my mind a brain freeze, but that screenshot I posted, it like cut the circuitry off in my mind where I didn't even know how to react. I'm like, wow, this Linkin Park fan actually believes this shit, that this is being done to collapse Scientology. So I don't know what's going to happen. I just think that those of us that are involved in this, it's a touchy subject matter because we are dealing with mainstream society and people that don't know about Scientology, don't give a fuck about Scientology. They just want to jam out to their favorite band. And when you're trying to tell them and dictate to them how they need to think and believe, it's not really going to be too successful, So just my 2 cents on it. And some of you may agree, some of you may not. There's probably a few things I'm forgetting to say about this whole thing, but I think I got the gist of it. And if there's something I forgot, I'll bother you all with another video. Alright, well, I hope you all are doing well. Take care. On a final note, to the incels who are watching this video, this has to do with, children, music culture, blah, blah, blah. You guys, the two incels that are obsessed with watching me, this video doesn't pertain to you guys because you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. So, with that being said, buenas noches.